Welcome to Mobility Matters, a webinar on-demand series from ALD Automotive. In each episode, we tackle a key topic within the fleet mobility market, providing scenarios, analysis, insights and case studies with the goal of helping fleet professionals better understand and navigate the fast-changing fleet mobility market. We cover a wide range of topics, including fleet decarbonisation and electrification, legislation and taxation, fleet policy, and the impact of technology on the fleet mobility ecosystem.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Mobility Matters. My name's Mark Evans, Head of Consultancy at ALD Automotive. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are joining me in this episode.
Hi, I'm Tash Turner, Fleet Consultant, specialising in financial modelling, total cost of ownership, fleet optimisation and mobility.
Hi, I'm Russ Bolton, LCV Consultant. I lead our commercial vehicle proposition, working with our customers to provide consultancy, insight and market intelligence to support their powertrain transition and overall fleet strategy.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this edition of Mobility Matters, where we're going to talk about the impact of temperature on battery and range. So, in a previous episode, we talked a lot about the pence per mile cost impact on various different vehicles, and we wanted to kind of frame this around a similar argument about what's the pence per mile impact. And in this case, we're going to kind of use a bit of an anecdotal story about one specific journey and what the impact is of temperature on that journey type. So the vehicle we're going to look at today is a Polestar 2 that regularly does a 200-mile journey between two sites, and what the impact of range is on that. So you can see on the screen that we've got a WLTP range of 294 miles, and in the real world that range varies significantly depending on the temperature.
I think that's quite a key point actually, Mark, isn't it? That manufacturers often provide estimated range figures, as we all know, so kind of based on the standardised tests. So, and they're normally under specific conditions, so which is under a moderate temperature range, I believe. So it's quite useful to actually look at the real world range on these cars.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's also obviously there's impact of driving style and everything else on these figures, and the fact that this example we're using now is predominantly on motorways. So, you know, driving between urban, rural, and on the motorway network are going to have different impacts as well. But if we look at these figures again based on this vehicle, then at a reasonable 20-degree temperature, we've got a sort of 250-mile range. And realistically, that range doesn't drop off significantly when the temperature remains fairly mild, moderate. But as soon as we get down sort of below 5 degrees, we see quite a significant impact on battery cost, or battery range, sorry, right down to, in this case, at minus 5 degrees, the range drops to 160 miles. And
I think one of the, sorry to cut across you there, Mark, but I think one of the significant parts of this is that you don't have that in a combustion engine vehicle. This is something that when people are transitioning to electric, it's another factor to consider. We've got a lot of the time in combustion engines, yes, you need to think about your driving style, the kind of journeys that you're taking. If it's motorway, it might have a benefit to MPGs as an example, but you don't tend to see a huge difference when it comes to temperature. It doesn't tend to have as big an impact, and I think one of the key factors around this is that temperature then also has an impact on your range, which then has an impact on your dependency on the public charging network as well, which means that you're actually accessing energy usually at a higher rate as well, doesn't it? So I think this is a really interesting one because it's a new phenomenon, I suppose, in journeys that will have to be accounted for a lot more. And I think some vehicles are probably more affected by temperature than others as well. I know that from my experience, my electric vehicle has been affected more than yours, hasn't it? When it comes to winter, which again has a massive impact on the efficiency of the vehicle, and it's the equivalent of taking a vehicle that's normally doing 60, 70 miles to the gallon, say in the summer, and then going down to 40, 30 in the winter. You know, that's not normally a common thing that most drivers will experience.
Yeah,
I'd agree with you actually, Russ, because like we said with the ICE vehicles, it was generally driver styles, wasn't it? Or in the winter, kind of tyres as well, like they kind of lose that pressure a bit easier. So you've still got that on the electric vehicles, but not only have you now got the individual driver, but you have individual vehicle models, the battery chemistry within that vehicle model, the thermal management system within that vehicle, and so many other factors as well, which can affect it alongside the outside temperature.
Exactly. And couple that with a vehicle that doesn't necessarily charge very quickly, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, with this Polestar that we're talking about right now, obviously it has a relatively decent charging speed, but there's other vehicles that would be, if they had exactly the same efficiency, or this, even if it was impacted by temperature in exactly the same way, a vehicle can differ from literally model to model with how much time you're going to be spending charging on the network. So as an example, you start going into some of the Korean brands, and they're, not amazing range, but phenomenally fast charging speeds, which does mean if you can utilize chargers that can deliver that speed, your downtime is much less in the winter in comparison to other models.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we look at this again using this scenario and this example and put it into some sort of context, then assuming effectively basic home energy cost for charging the vehicle and a full battery charge, then in the summer that journey's probably equating to around about 12 pence per mile. Once we factor in the fact that the vehicle can't complete that journey because it doesn't have enough range, then it's reliant on the public network, but also inherently at that point it is less efficient anyway, and then you're having to charge some of that range at almost double the cost. And then the knock-on effect of that is that in the winter that same journey is costing around 19 pence a mile, so it's a 7 pence per mile increase. And this is something I think that needs to be kind of factored into the thinking around electric vehicles, and to your point, Russ, around the time that would actually need to be spent charging on that journey.
And as we know, we've got the calculators and different tools in Consultancy that do factor this in. And it is really interesting to see exactly the same journey between summer and winter and the effect that being in an EV would have on that journey and on the driver to a large extent. We've got some examples where, like I say, you might be charging for 40 minutes extra versus winter versus summer. And if you're doing that same journey quite regularly, that can have quite a bearing on a driver, can't it? And there's potentially their satisfaction of driving that vehicle and how content they are at work or how content they are on that journey. I know that I'm definitely more disgruntled if I have to spend longer charging from one journey to another.
Equally it is, it's like you say, it's the impact on downtime as well. So often fleets and customers are asking us, aren't they, so is it worthwhile us maybe excluding the super rapid chargers because they're quite expensive and not allowing our drivers to tap into that network? Maybe it isn't as black and white of maybe allowing them or disallowing them. Maybe it's allowing them throughout winter just to try and minimise downtime when there's heavier usage on the public charging network.
Agreed.
So you can kind of be a bit more strategic with your kind of fleet policies to try and factor some of this in as well and find that balance point between cost to charge and downtime.
Yeah, and
that's
I think
a really interesting point. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points really, is that yes, there is an impact, but actually within fleet policy and with the right vehicle choice and the right vehicle mix and understanding the operational requirements of the fleet, that this actually doesn't hinder developing an electric vehicle policy at all. It doesn't hinder the adoption of electric vehicles. It's just about thinking about how that works operationally within the business and with the fleet of vehicles and the vehicles that are chosen for certain roles within a fleet.
And it also depends on the fleet, doesn't it? It depends on the driver as to whether or not that downtime can be working time. If it isn't working time, then it's maybe a slightly different calculation, because you might need to consider the cost of the downtime of that driver and factor that into how many miles you're taking from a public charging network, which obviously completely changes the pence per mile. But in this scenario, we're just looking purely at fuel. And I think this is, again, quirks or nuances of electric vehicles, but just on fuel, there's a 7 pence difference, but that can be amplified, can't it, quite easily, if you don't understand, or if you really take downtime costs into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully that's given a quick but useful overview of the impact of temperature and range and some of the considerations around that, and in future episodes we'll talk about ways potentially of mitigating some of that and some of the other considerations. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Mobility Matters. If you wish to learn more about the topics discussed in this or any other episode, or wish to find out about the products and solutions we provide to fleet operators, please visit www.aldautomotive.co.uk/future.